Management of the Parklands property is now a talking point for the Jasper City Council. More on that. Plus, I sit down with April Blessinger and Paige Kendall to talk about this weekend's back-to-school night at the Teen Outback, and Kelly Wiseman and Chester Bear are tonight's guests on Inform. All of that and much more is up next here on the 18 WJTS News. Hello, I'm Bradford Raths. We begin tonight with concerns over the management of the Parklands property. Last night, the Jasper City Council held a discussion on how the land should be governed. Currently, the Jasper Redevelopment Commission holds the land and it's managed by the Jasper Parks Department. That didn't sit well with some on the council. The discussion then moved towards having the Park Board take sole control of the Parklands property for any present and future development. Jasper Mayor Terry Seitz says the discussion is all part of what will be a lengthy process for the Parklands property.
When you have a project of that magnitude that you had to make some moves on to acquire for the future, it literally is a future. It takes a long time to even bring budget into play because our budget is roughly an 18-month rolling process.
Seitz says 2015's budget will mark the first time for the city to specifically set aside money for the Parklands property. He says the next budget will utilize reserve money from the Park Department's budget to be used for that purpose. The final vision report is set to be presented at the next meeting of the Park Board. That meeting is set for September 9th. The Parklands property opened for public use back on July 1st as a walking trail and managed meadows area. It had been closed since the end of 2012 when the former Jasper Country Club ceased operations. In other news this evening, a Jasper man was taken into custody after he battered a woman at his apartment. Just after 12:30 yesterday, Jasper police were called to an apartment in the 300 block of East 5th Street after a 911 call from apartment B was disconnected before dispatch could speak with anyone. When they arrived at the home, officers were told that 30-year-old Vincent Gonzalez had battered a woman who lived at the apartment. Officers then learned a second woman tried to call 911 after the incident, but the call was disconnected after Gonzalez pulled the phone cord from the phone. Gonzalez was taken into custody and lodged in the Du Bois County Security Center. He is facing a battery charge along with a Class A misdemeanor for interfering with the reporting of a crime. The North Spencer School Corporation's budget is now being finalized, and not a whole lot has changed. The total budget is just under $19 million for 2015. The budget includes a general fund of just over $12.3 million. Other funds include the capital projects, transportation, debt service, bus replacement, and pension bonds. The district's assessed value is estimated at $575 million for 2015, up slightly from $560 million in 2014. The district's advertised tax rate was at $1.13 per $100 of assessed value. North Spencer Superintendent Dan Sherry says that tax rate will likely wind up dropping down closer to last year's 85-cent tax rate. He says he is happy with the district's fiscal responsibility in recent years. The public hearing on the budget is coming up during this next Monday's school board meeting at 7 p.m. Central Time. Sherry says the budget will likely be adopted at the board's September 22nd meeting. Anglers can learn more about a plan to improve fishing at West Boggs Lake in Lagodi at an August 28th open house being hosted by the DNR Division of Fish and Wildlife and the Davies-Martin Joint County Parks and Recreation Department. The open house will take place from 5 till 7 p.m. at the West Boggs Park Activity Center at the intersection of Deckard Road and Crane Lane inside of the property. Entry to the park will be free for those attending the open house. The Division of Fish and Wildlife and the Joint Parks and Recreation Department will outline the plan for the lake and watershed renovation of West Boggs Lake that is set for the end of September. Information will include the lake drawdown schedule, fish salvage, fish eradication, and restocking of fish. Now, West Boggs Lake has been invaded by gizzard shad, which compete with bluegill and small bass for food. In lakes with gizzard shad populations, bluegill growth is stunted and the bass numbers thus decline. More information on the renovation can be found by going to dnr.in.gov/fishwild. Two troopers with the Indiana State Police Jasper Post have been recognized for a job well done. Sergeant Robert Gardner was presented with a commendation award. Meanwhile, Trooper Jared Lentz was honored with the Purple Heart and a Combat Action Award. The awards were presented during a ceremony held yesterday afternoon at the Indiana Government Center. Gardner's commendation award was related to his efforts in a missing persons case back in 2009. On November 2nd of that year, a 15-year-old girl was reported missing to the Spencer County Sheriff's Department by her mother and stepfather. While the initial report was being taken, a Spencer County deputy found the girl's body in the backyard of the family's home. Sergeant Gardner, along with other Jasper Post troopers, were then called to the scene, and Gardner immediately took a leadership role in this investigation. The investigation took a little less than 2 days, after which the stepfather was arrested. Sergeant Gardner then spent many hours assisting the Spencer County Prosecutor's Office with preparing the case. The trial began back in May of 2012. During that trial, Gardner spent more than 4 days testifying, and it ended with the stepfather's conviction on all criminal counts. Meanwhile, Trooper Lentz was honored for his work on a reported disturbance turned deadly in Daviess County last year. Back on June 17th of 2013, Lentz was called to the Black Oak Armament Gun Shop in Montgomery after it was reported that a man was trying to rob the store. At about 2 o'clock that afternoon, Lentz and a 60-year-old James Jones of Shoals exchanged gunfire. Trooper Lentz was hit at least 5 times by bullets during that exchange. After he was taken to Daviess Community Hospital, his injuries were found to be non-life-threatening. He was then treated and released and returned to work on July 1st of last year. Jones was later pronounced dead at the hospital from a single gunshot wound to the head. Finally this evening, a court official says a man accused in the fatal shooting and stabbing of a fellow Purdue University student has pleaded guilty to murder. Cody Cousins of Warsaw made the plea during a Tippecanoe County court hearing held earlier today. He has been jailed since his arrest soon after the January 21st attack that killed 21-year-old Andrew Bolt of West Bend, Wisconsin, inside of a Purdue classroom. Cousins' defense attorney said back in May that he would pursue an insanity defense. Tippecanoe Superior Court bailiff Brenda Rohde says the judge will decide the issue of Cousins' mental state during a sentencing hearing that is set for September 19th. Cousins and Bolt were both electrical engineering students at Purdue. All right, coming up after the break, my interview with April Blessinger and Paige Kendall about back-to-school night at the Huntingburg Teen Outback, plus your local forecast, sports with Kurt Gooksell, and Inform with Kelly Wiseman and Chester Bayer. That's all up next here on the 18 WJTS News. Local people watching local people.